Rise of Hawk Part 2, Scene 24. Talon's head throbbed horrifically. Dragging himself up onto his hands and knees, he rested his forehead on the dusty wood. "Talon," his sister called out again. "You okay?" "Not really," he groaned. Holding onto the door frame, he pulled himself to his feet and looked around. Two bodies lay on the polished floor. The man made of rage and a blonde woman. He was breathing. She was not. "Did you shoot her?" asked Asha, who stood between the two bodies. He shook his head. "No, I didn't even see her." Asha stepped over the woman's body and into the dining room. Tay, leaning on walls and door frames, followed her. Through a haze of pain he saw the dining room beyond was a mess. Blood pooled around two bodies that lay in the middle of the room. The 15 or so survivors, plus one injured man, were all crowded against the far end of the dining room. Fear and surprise were still on their faces. Tay leaned his shoulder against a wall and slipped down to the floor in an effort to stabilise the world. He couldn't seem to sense anything psychic through the pain, which was both a worry and a relief to his sensitive nerve endings. Whatever the man had done, he hoped it wasn't permanent. "Who shot the female assassin?" Asha's voice was quiet. "That would be me." Tay looked up, and through the pain he saw Father Owen on the floor near the doorway, with Nalana underneath him as if he'd protected her. His sister sounded unimpressed. "And who are you?" "It's Father Owen." Tay spoke up, his voice uneven. "You were unconscious, Asha. He was arrested because of me. Nama and I broke him out." "Where did you learn to shoot, Father?" There was a dark undertone to Asha's voice. "And move that quickly." Man got up off of Nalana and stood with one hand behind his back in a respectful semi-military stance. Nalana immediately came over to sit next to Talon. Her warm, pain-easing hands lifted to touch his temples, and Tay closed his eyes. Echoing in the broad room, Father Owen's voice was tense. "That's a long story, ma'am." "Short version, now," Asha snapped. "My parents were army. I went to military school and planned to join when I was 18. My parents died before then and I had to run. Father Andrew offered me somewhere safe. He said if I became a priest, I couldn't be conscripted." "Of course," Asha agreed. "The military and the priesthood are the only places the agency can't take people. Is your name Owen?" "No, it's Nathan." "Last name," she barked. "Amon." Impatience underlined her words. "Psi, talent." "I was never tested." The priest's voice was almost a whisper. "But I can dodge bullets." "Bullets?" Asha sounded surprised. Tay spoke up again, his eyes opening to look at Asha's back. "Saw it yesterday. He's definitely a dodge talent. Fairly high rated too." "Well, Nathan Amon, you're on a short leash until Hawk clears you. For now, help Rain and Bree carry the man outside, up to the second floor." There was a pause and no one moved. "Now, people!" Asha barked, and the three she'd named moved to do as she said. "New guy." She turned to address someone directly in front of her that Tay couldn't see. "Raha," the person replied. "Whatever. You get to earn your keep by finding the tracker on that Sothan hub. If you haven't found it in 30 minutes, the hub will be destroyed." Asha turned and glanced behind her. "Nala, once you've finished with Tay, get some people to help you with our injured." She moved to address the room again. "We'll also need some volunteers to bury our bodies and dump that woman out there somewhere far away. Everyone else, I want you to pack this building ready for an evac in 1 hour. And for founders' sakes, someone send Kid to Orana upstairs when he gets here." His sister sounded angry, but as she turned around to face him again, Talon saw in her eyes that she was more afraid and pained than particularly angry. She looked down at him, her voice very gentle. "Are you okay?" "Yeah, I think so." Nalana's hands lifted from his temples as he nodded. "Thanks, Nala." The girl smiled, got to her feet and headed across the room. Asha gave him a tired smile. "You have the most remarkable psi flexibility, Tay. Everyone else I've seen attacked like that by Bana is dead." He offered a hand to help him stand up. "Come, walk with me upstairs. Tell me what you know about this priest guy. Nama knows more. I only met him yesterday. He took her hand and stood, still feeling a little wobbly, but not as bad as he probably should be. They turned towards the door. Well, in front of them, Father Owen was helping the others to lift the assassin's body with his good arm. Talon sensed a very gentle mental touch from Asha, and her voice sounded with little to no pain in his head. What are your first impressions of him? Walking behind the three struggling with the assassin, they headed towards the stairwell. He's more than he seems, quietly cocky, and he doesn't seem to be afraid of much, even death. I don't sense any hostility towards us, but there is something. He frowned and let his words fade into a feeling of uncertainty. Does your gut think he's a threat? Talon shook his head. My gut doesn't know. There's something about him that's hidden, but I can't see if it's hostile or not. They started up the stairs, and she continued verbally. Listen, when Kita gets here, I'm going to need you to go away for a while. He frowned. Why's that? We need to interrogate the prisoner. You're too sensitive. It'll hurt you. They reached the top of the stairs, and as they turned into the hall, he looked sideways at her. That bad, huh? She nodded. It's agony, especially for someone as sensitive as Bana. What about you? You're an empath. They reached the north end of the second floor hall. Waiting behind the others, they watched while the prisoner was dragged through the doorway into a warm, sunny room and dumped on the carpet. Yes, but I'm only a level 2 empath, more than half as sensitive as you, but with 10 times the training. I can handle it. I've seen Nama outside. Can you go and help him with his errand? He frowned. What errand? Ask him to explain. I don't have time. She stepped forward into the room, again the commanding leader that she had been downstairs. Nathan, Rain, stay in here. Bree, guard the door. She turned to look back at Talon. Go now, please. He took one last look at Asha and turned to head downstairs. Scene 25. Wearily touching her aching stomach wound with one hand, Asha glanced at the two people in the room with her. White-haired Rain was a telepath and not an empath, so he would be able to keep a physical guard while they did this thing. And this Nathan, she thought in frustration, as if we need any more complications. She cleared her throat. Nathan, are you an empath? He shook his head. No, ma'am. You and Rain are here in case Bana tries to fight physically. Otherwise no one must interfere with either Kita or myself. Understand? Two men nodded, and Asha sighed heavily. The pain still throbbed through her abdomen, final remnants of the previous day's gunshot wound. She could really do with more sleep before doing this interrogation. But they couldn't wait. If Bana had reported their location to the agency, reinforcements would be sent very soon. Nearby, the door opened and closed quietly. She looked sideways to see Kita there. He looked calm, but she empathically sensed a deep shaft of dread from him. She gave him a sympathetic smile. I'm sorry to ask this of you, Kita, but it needs to be done. Kita looked down at Bana's unconscious body. I do understand, but just so you know, Bana is my cousin. Surprised, she stepped back. Your cousin? He brushed a stray lock of blonde from his eyes. Yes, maternal cousins. Do you have... No, he interrupted. No problem getting answers from him. I've never been close to my family. She smiled. That explains why you weren't in the same graduating class. Those calm, grey-blue eyes of Kita's looked into her for a moment, and then he frowned. You were A0? Not technically. My husband was. We can talk about it later. We need to get this done before the evac is complete. Of course. Do you know how to do a handoff? Yes. She linked momentarily with Kita's mind and then Bana's. Undoing the sleep program, she handed the rest of the telepathic process over to Kita, who expertly took it and anchored firmly in Bana's mind, ready for the interrogation. Careful to fully disconnect from Bana and Kita, and as subtly as she could so the others wouldn't sense her, Asha stretched her mental touch to Hawk on a tight, private telepathic band. Bana woke quickly and was immediately confused about his surroundings. The confusion lifted with a grunt of pain as Keita tightened his mental grip. "Name, rank and code in," she said coldly. There was a moment of quiet, and she sensed Keita apply pressure to Bana's mind. "Bana Mala," he gasped. A0, rank 14, specialist assassin, elite class. Code in A040180. Access 4059. "Immediate superior," she barked. The pain increased in Bana, and Bana started to pant. "Heth Palin, have you reported your location to the agency?" His square face screwed up and he gasped. "No, open book assignment. Only way we work." She nodded slowly. "No reports broadcast until mission accomplished, correct?" "Yes." "Ask him about the spy." Hawke's voice ran in her mind. "Spy within the rebels. What do you know about them?" I can't." Keita tightened his grip around Bana's mind. He cried out in agony. She closed her eyes in an effort to suppress the pain spiralling out from him. She let her voice sound a little gentle. "Please, Bana, answer the question." "Hoyle will find me and kill me, please." He screamed again and curled up into a ball, with his hands grasping at his head. "Spy is male." Keita seemed to loosen his grip on Bana, easing some of the pain and allowing him to speak clearer. "Spy isn't one of the originals, but he wasn't very high rank in the agency. Heth is always complaining how undisciplined he is." He gasped again as Keita tightened his mental grip. Until recently, the information from him was too general and useless." He paused, swallowing repeatedly. Asha sensed he was suppressing the urge to vomit. I don't know much. I don't have a name." She nodded. "How long has the spy been working for the agency?" He lay on his side, curled up from the agony in his mind. 2 years, I think." "How did Heth recruit him?" His voice was getting quieter. "Spy approached us." "How does he pass on information?" "Not sure." Bana stretched his body out again, hands flat on the carpet with his eyes closed and tears running down the sides of his face. "Hub. He contacts one of the hubs." "Spy must have a satellite device," injected Hawke. "Yes, and if our new recruit can get the tracker off the hub, we can use it to trace the device. What else do we need? He won't last much longer." "Ask about me, about the investigation." The others of the room, including Keita, were looking at her expectantly. She wished for a second that she could multitask better, and cleared her throat. "What does the agency know about Hawke?" "Not much." Bana lifted one arm and rested the crook of his elbow over his eyes. "All sounds like Mammon to me." "Mammon or not, what do you know?" Keita tightened his mental grip again, and Bana groaned. Yellow sticky notes. Perfect timing to help traders escape." "He's like a ghost. Gets in and out of places no one can get to. Does the impossible. That first escape in 3000. They used Jaren's login codes." He laughed weakly. He was so mad. "Jaren?" "Jaren Cody Sr., head of the Azera Council. He's a psycho like my brother Hoyle. Worse. He's going to kill every single one of you, or die trying." Bana closed his eyes. He seemed half-conscious, almost delirious. "I hope it's the latter." "Bana," the voice was quiet and almost gentle, "do they have any idea who Hawke is?" "No, he's a ghost." He lifted his arm from his face and looked up at her with dark, pleading eyes. "Please, Asha, put our bodies somewhere the agency could find us. Save my daughter. She's only 4. Asha swallowed. "Already being done, Bana." He glanced sideways at Keita, whose ordinarily handsome face was so ice cold he looked like some kind of alien. "Put him back under." Scene 26. Rain's heart beat thunderously in his ears. Asha, Hawke's second, was getting too close to discovering him, and he was terrified. As Usher, the priest, and the interrogator descended the broad stone stairwell down to the ground floor, Rain deliberately lagged behind them. He had to slip away, shut down his remote device, free the prisoner, and get them out of there before Usher found him and killed him. He hadn't known that Usher was XA0, and the thought terrified him. He knew with every cell in his body that if she got hold of him, she would make him suffer terribly before he died. Downstairs in the ground floor hall, people ran around with boxes and bags in their hands, piling supplies up along the wall for evacuation. The female assassin's body was gone, and as they stepped into the dining room, he saw that the bodies of the 2 dead rebels were covered by stained cloth. Usher approached the new guy, obviously a computer talent of some description, who sat in the middle of the dining room with pieces of hub laptops spread out in front of him. The undercasing of the computer, screws and plating were all placed in ordered piles on the hardwood floor. The young man still wore his agency blue suit pants and cream shirt, although the uniform jacket was entirely absent. As they moved forward, Rain slowly crept back towards the door. Usher barked, "New guy." "It's Raha, and I found it." The man handed a small piece of computer chip to her. "Good." Rain stepped back again as he watched her take the computer chip from the young man, drop it on the ground, and stamp the heel of her boot down onto it. "How long do you think it will take to put that computer back together and reprogram the uplink to find the nearest signal?" "Not long, a few minutes." The grey-eyed computer talent started to put the pieces back onto the laptop base. "You want to take another hub?" "No, maybe later." Hate flickered into Usher's voice. "Right now, I'm after a spy." Her words echoed out into the hall, and in the doorway, Rain nearly stumbled from the shaft of terror that shot through him. Stepping out of sight, finally, he ran down the corridor and up the stairwell again, 2 steps at a time. At the door to the north side room, Rain grabbed his weapon out from his holster, cocked it, and stepped inside. He lifted his gun and fired at the young, dark-haired Bree who had been left in the room as a guard. The bullet hit her square on, splattering blood onto the wall behind her. She didn't even let out a sound before she fell, dead. He got down on the floor next to the agent and touched the man's face. Rain wasn't nearly as strong or adept telepathically as the interrogator, but he knew enough to undo much of the sleep program. It didn't take long for Barnett to regain consciousness, and when he did, Rain sensed through their physical touch that his mental shielding had been quite badly shredded by the interrogator. "Can you walk, sir? You need to get up. There isn't time." "What? Who are you?" said a tired voice. "I'm Rain. I'm here to help you." "Come on, we have to go before Usher gets back." Dark eyes opened and stared up at him. "You're the spy." "Yes, we can escape, but we have to go now." Rain pushed at the man's shoulders. "Come on, get up." "No." Barna's voice was strong. Scene break. Enigma watched Barna and Rain silently from the doorway. His shielding and natural talent for being psychically invisible kept even the high-rated Barna from sensing his presence unless he was physically seen. "What?" The young man, Rain, sounded incredulous. On the carpeted floor, Barna's voice was strained. "At least I know Usher will kill me quickly. Not so with my brother. If you want to escape, go. Even if I could stand, I'm not coming with you." One corner of Enigma's mouth lifted in dark amusement. This was a new development. Barna, a seemingly dedicated and loyal agent, deciding he'd rather stay a prisoner of the rebels than go home to the agency. He could certainly use this to his advantage. Rain got to his feet, and Enigma stepped back into the shadows of another room out of sight. The young man was terrified, so much so he was obviously not thinking straight. Enigma watched Rain try to go up the hall to the stairwell, but he seemed to decide against it. Instead, he ducked into another first-floor room. Enigma followed Rain. In the other room, the young man stepped through some broad windows onto a fire escape and down a metal ladder out of sight. Enigma stepped into the room as the sounds of Usher and a number of others came up the stairwell and past him to the far room. Pacing towards the rusting, floor-to-ceiling windows, but remaining out of sight of both the incoming rabble and Rain, Enigma looked outside. Below, Rain pushed through the overgrown garden, opened the side gate, and jogged out into the street. From his vantage point above RoH, Enigma saw Talon and Nama standing guard further up the road. The corner of his mouth lifted again. The spy's escape route had been anticipated, and very soon RoH would be dead. Asha had done a very good job of terrifying RoH and flushing him outside without even knowing his identity. Enigma suppressed an amused chuckle. Undisciplined fool. With the spy identified and dead, everyone would now relax a bit. It would be easier to integrate into the rebel cell without all of their anger and suspicion darting around looking for targets. He almost couldn't have planned the situation better. He just had to preemptively control the new prisoner's behaviour so he wouldn't tell them his real name, and he was set. Asha's cohorts were talking to Bana in the next room, and returning to his Nathan persona, Enigma moved back towards the noise before he was missed. Bana sensed the spy stand up and turn away from him, but had already closed his eyes again in an effort to slow the painful throbbing in his head. He wasn't permanently damaged. His cousin was very good at what he did, but it didn't matter if he was damaged or not. His daughter would live, and that was all he cared about. The rest was simply waiting for Makra to come. Nearby, the door bashed hard against a wall, and Bana flinched. Asha stood in the doorway with his cousin Kita. Several others stepped into the room and surrounded him. Their weapon barrels lifted. "Why are you awake? Where's the spy?" Asha demanded. He sighed. Said his name was RoH. He was trying to free me. Why didn't you go with him, Bana? He leaned his head back on the carpet and closed his eyes again. Here or there, I'm dead anyway. A gunshot echoed from outside on the street. There was a short silence, and Asha's voice was cold. RoH's dead now. Her tone dropped into a grumpy bark. You others, come with me. Nathan, guard him until I can send someone up to relieve you. Yes, ma'am. A number of sets of feet left the room again, and the door shut. It was quiet. Bana couldn't feel the man who was supposed to be in there with him. They were probably an ex-assassin and deliberately hiding. He wondered if they'd play some sort of game with him that ended it with his death. It would almost be welcome. There was a long moment of silence, and he wished they would just get it over with or put him back to sleep so he could escape the throbbing pulse in his head. Near the door, a male presence stepped out of his psychic invisibility. How are you holding up, Bana? The voice was cold, calm, and oddly familiar to him. Bana opened his eyes and looked up. His eyes widened and he stared at absolute terrified surprise. He knew the man standing nearby, wearing black, his left arm in a stained sling, his square face bruised and beaten. Bana knew the ice-blue eyes. The youngest son of Jaron Cody Sr. His voice came out as a whisper. What's going on, sir? I'm surprised you didn't take the spy's offer and leave with him. Bana sensed an icy hostility underneath the man's words, and he swallowed. Even injured and unarmed, Enigma was a formidable enemy. Perhaps you want to become a rebel like your traitorous parents? Bana swallowed and tried to defend himself. I understand this, Bana. There was venom in his voice. I am after Hawk, and Hawk alone. Live or die here with the rebels. I don't care. The man leaned over him, and Bana fearfully pulled away. I can even keep silent to my father about your survival, if you like, to protect your precious daughter. But in exchange for this freedom, I expect your silence. He stood upright again, glaring coldly. I have plans for this cover identity, and if you ruin those plans in any way, no matter where you go or what you do, I will hunt you down and kill you. Do you understand me? Bana swallowed. Yes, sir. Good. Scene 27. That evening. The cold in Nama's new building permeated right to Nalana's core, making her shiver almost constantly. They'd only been at that pretty building one night, and she already missed it. She and Talon worked for over an hour to get the fire going in the central room of the new building, using bits of damp wood and rubbish they'd found in the basement. Finally, after discovering an old newspaper, they got the fire lit and roaring away. Nalana sat on the dusty wood floor with her back to the fire. She let the heat push out the shivering ice in her limbs. Their new common room was fairly large, but had no natural light because it sat in the very middle of the building. The hallways that came off the central space were like a dungeon maze of dim corridors and confusing offshoots all over the place. But on the positive side, there didn't seem to be any holes in the wooden floors and walls. The ceiling seemed intact, and what windows it had were all sealed with double glazed glass, so that once the place got warm and dry, it would probably stay that way. It wasn't her idea of a nice place to live, because there wasn't enough sunlight and no floor coverings, but with the fire it would be tolerable. After an hour, the heat had permeated her body, so that she was finally warm all over with no cold spots. Candles burned in little crockery trays at random intervals, adding to the flickering amber light that pushed against the shadows. Others of Nama's cell were pacing through the dimness, doing their nightly chores. Those rebels who had managed to swap duties, or perhaps finished theirs, were collecting in the room in anticipation of Nama's evening card game. "Come on, Nathan, I ain't read the holy book from cover to cover, but surely a little card game ain't against the Founder's teachings." Nalana looked up across the room to where Nama and Father Nathan, she corrected herself, stood in the doorway. One side of the priest's mouth lifted up in that familiar expression of amusement. It's not specifically mentioned, no, but I have many chores to do. Maybe some other night, Nama." Nathan seemed so mysterious to Nalana, a man who'd been a soldier, then became a priest, just to stay out of the agency. It was an odd combination, more so because until she'd seen him shoot the assassin woman, she wouldn't have picked him to be the kind of person who could kill people. She was usually such a good judge of character. Nathan turned away into the shadows as Nama came towards the circle of people collected together in the firelight. "You all ready, I take it?" He addressed the room with a broad, playful grin on his face, and then saw Nalana. "You in too, Nala?" She lifted the watch and ring she had pickpocketed yesterday from some businessman in the street. "Yep." Nama's laugh was good-natured. "Never ceases to amaze me, your pickpocketing. How could such a nice big girl be so good at thieving?" "Survival," she retorted. He sat down and put a bottle of his rum into the middle for the first round of cards. Nalana wasn't as familiar or good at the Iranian card game as she would have liked, but she enjoyed the jovial company, and when she bet the things she stole it didn't feel so much like a loss. The rules were that telepaths and empaths weren't allowed to cheat. This wasn't really enforced, but very few people cheated anyway. Other than that one rule, the game was the same as one of those at the casino. It involved certain combinations of cards having more value than others, and betting against other players that your cards were a more valuable combination than theirs. The winner was either the person with the best cards or the best bluff, and Nama was very good at bluffing, so he usually won. The game went on for many hours and rounds. Slowly over that time, the numbers of players dropped from nearly 20 to a small handful. Surprisingly, Nalana had won enough hands to still be playing. She grinned happily at Nama across the considerably smaller circle of people, and he grinned back. "Well, Nalana, are you going to bet or fold?" She pushed the bottle of rum she'd won in the first round into the centre. "Bet?" The other three rebels dropped their cards immediately and folded almost in unison, including Talon. Nama laughed and winked at her. "On 3?" Looking down at her cards, she couldn't help but grin even broader. "Yes. 1, 2, 3. Together they dumped their cards face up, and upon seeing her perfect hand, Nama swore while the others gasped in surprise. "You had Lady Krenna on your side tonight, young Nala." A happy, bubbly laugh came out of her, and she reached to pull in her winnings. Bits of jewellery, small and large bottles of alcohol, Talon's father's necklace, and one lone $20 bill were now hers. She grinned, knowing that she was not likely to be that lucky again. Lifting the silver 4-petal flower that used to belong to Seda Khan by its rough metal chain, she handed it back to Talon. He gave her a bashful but relieved smile. "Thanks." She lifted an eyebrow at him. "You shouldn't bet stuff that precious." A gentle smile loosened the blush in his cheeks. I know, won't happen again. Better not, 'cause next time I'm keeping it. Still laughing, Nama collected his cards, which had once belonged to his grandfather, and put them into an ornate leather box. Okay, bedtime, kids. Scene break. Nalana woke to a dark but warm room. Deep breathing and the occasional snort told her that it was very late, and everyone else was asleep. She wasn't exactly sure what had woken her, but now that she was conscious, she sensed some kind of tension in the air. It was something nearing anxiety or perhaps frustration, but it was not her own. The blankets next to her on the wood floor were empty, and she sat up to look around. Nathan's figure dodged adeptly through the ocean of sleeping forms towards the nearby exit. "Father," she whispered, "what are you doing?" He tensed and froze like a thief who'd been caught. It was a moment of silence, and he turned to look back at her. The firelight reflected off his ice-blue eyes, making them seem to almost glow. "I can't sleep. I thought a brisk walk would help." "Go back to sleep, Nalana. Don't worry about me." "I can help you sleep," she said a little louder. There was a quiet laugh. "Oh, really? And how was that?" "I can take the ache out of that shoulder for you and tell you a story. My nan used to tell me all sorts of stories when I was little. In fact, it's the fastest way to get me to sleep." "What kind of stories?" There was a gentle amusement in him. "The old gods, time speakers, the first rebels. I could tell you a story about Hawk if you like." It was a shift from amusement to piqued interest, and she knew she had him. "About Hawk? What do you know about him?" "Just what Ma used to say. Come back to bed, I'll tell you one." A shadow with glowing blue eyes looked away for a moment, making the blue flicker off like an electrical light. "Okay." He managed to cross back through the crowded room, over tightly packed sleeping bodies, without making a sound or waking anyone. Slipping into the lone sleeping blankets, he rested an elbow on the pillow and looked at her. She couldn't see the details of his face, except for the occasional flicker of glowing blue from reflected firelight, but she sensed a man who was expecting to be right about something. "Lie back," she said, smiling at his inherent cockiness. He did as he was told, and she placed her hands over the pulsing pain in his shoulder. It had been mostly healed by Ren, but there was still a surface injury that had to heal in the normal way. It also took at least a few days for the body to catch up with the fact that it was suddenly not injured, so there was usually an odd ache associated with healed bullet wounds. The buzzing warm energy flowed through her body and out of her hands into his shoulder. It wiped away the tight, throbbing ache, and lifted out the underlying muscle pain of still injured surface flesh. He let out an unconscious sigh of relief. The healing energy shut off, but she did not lift her hands from him. She took a breath. Not long ago, there was a man. He was just a man with all the same flaws and weaknesses as everyone else. He lived a comfortable, happy life. But one day, Mekra came to his house and rose up a great winter storm, destroying and killing as it blew through the man's house. She paused, adeptly channeling a sense of deep fatigue into the unconscious parts of his body in a way that would ease almost anyone into sleep. When the storms of Mekra faded away, the man was left badly injured, and the only one alive in the rubble. As he lay waiting for help to come, one of the old gods, one of the guardians of time, reached down to him in his agony and offered him a wooden hawk mask. He asked the figure what was he to do with such a mask, and the guardian answered, "Put the mask on and become the one to save everyone from the coming darkness." The man was confused and asked, "What darkness?" The guardian bent over his prone form in the rubble and touched his forehead with a single finger, giving him the gift of true vision, the vision of a time speaker. The guardian continued and said, "Because I charge you with this mission, you cannot die until it is fulfilled." So the man also found himself healed from his wounds. Nalana watched Nathan's eyes close drowsily. His breath slowed as he floated sideways towards sleep under her empathic manipulations. She lowered her voice to the tone her mother had used in doing the same trick with her. "The man agreed to take on this mission, And from that day on he became Hawk, the one man charged by the old gods themselves to save the rebels from the agency, but also as an agent himself. Nathan's face twitched for a moment, and he sensed what was left of his conscious mind fight to remain conscious before dropping away into sleep. Getting back into her own sleeping blankets, Nalana grinned with an uncharacteristic sense of cocky victory. Very few people could fight that empathic trick of her mother's. She was proud to be able to do it to help her friends sleep.